And I think we are live.
It says live. We're 11 seconds live.
First time here.
Hi, guys. First time. It's a little rough, but we know you like it. Here we go. Getting live here. Here we are.
I just want to make sure it's live on our YouTube. And
this
we're
is,
live
this
on
is
YouTube.
raw, unfiltered. Here we go.
Let's make sure we're live on Twitter.
Here we are.
You see it?
I'm checking. Let me check Twitter. Hold on. Let me check
live
YouTube.
On Twitter. This is so cool.
Oh, are you serious?
Yeah,
oh my God, we're live on Twitter. This is amazing.
Okay, I'm going to play the intro just because.
All right, here we go.
And then we'll pretend like we're pros.
Here we go.
So welcome, everyone. All 6 people watching right now to the live stream, the Business of Esports live stream number 1. Our first ever live stream, which we've been meaning to do forever now, and are finally getting around to it. I want to welcome Jeff Cohen to the live stream, who was our guest on this week's podcast, which you guys have not heard yet, but which will be coming out tomorrow.
It's an excellent podcast.
Jeff.
They said top 3. I think they may have meant it. I'm not sure.
It was. We just recorded it. We're pretty excited about it. I think it will end up being top 3. We spend a lot of time talking about the public gaming companies. Might be Cam. What's up, guys? Hey, it's cool. I get comments here too. We're going to take questions.
I know.
Talk about topics.
This is like the start of a new era. So, guys,
hey, there you go.
Yeah, might be Cam. What's up, guys? Yeah, look at that. Hey, so just so for everyone who's watching, this is almost as much for our edification because we weren't even sure if technically we'd be able to pull this off. So, but we do have a slate of comments, stuff we want to talk about, articles to go through. So this should be good content. But thank you for bearing with us on this inaugural live stream because honestly, we don't know what to expect either. So hopefully it's fun. And now you know what we look like. I'm in Azeroth and Paul's in the BOE. Actually, no, you're in your, where are you? BOE at home recording studio, right?
At home.
Yeah. Yeah.
But no, I was going to say, we're going to toy with the format here. I think we have, and there's like 20 of you watching that. Wow, this is cool.
The numbers go up, Paul. It's addictive. This is the streaming juice. Like,
we have some topics teed up, which we didn't cover on the podcast. So ideally, we're going to try and cover topics that we don't get to on the podcast, which will be fun. But also, we want to take questions. We want this to be interactive. So like, send us comments, send us questions the whole time. We may get to some of them at the end. If they're like bigger topics, we may address them immediately. I mean, Might Be Cam says we look and sound good, which is all that matters, right? That's pretty much half the battle. But we figured we conquered the podcast world. Mm-hmm. We have to conquer the live streaming world now. It's the next frontier. Well, so guys, let's jump into a topic. Let's not keep people waiting.
Wait. But before we jump in, I just really want to urge people, like, even if you don't have anything to say, like, please, for us, it's going to help us practice to interact and get engaged. So reach out, type to us. Like, the whole fun of a live stream is for it to be interactive. Even if it's something like, stupid, like, hey, William, like, your Hearthstone shirt is dumb. Like, tell us, whatever, because we need to understand there's a reason we're not doing this as just podcast 2.0, right? Like, we want this to be us talking to you and having a dialogue. So we're going to run that way. And hopefully it'll be a wild ride. So buckle up.
It says Adam said Paul's audio is a little low. So hang on. Let me boost my audio. Is this better, Adam? I don't know if that sounds a bit better. I feel like I sound very loud right now, but,
plot twist. Adam just had the volume turned down on his computer.
Yeah. And now I'm just booming. Since everyone knows me for the shill that I am, let's get this out of the way, folks. Let's just get this out of the way. Go buy William's book, please. Okay, now that you're watching, it's right here on Amazon. You see, you just go, you click pre-order. I get a free copy, so I haven't ordered it, of course.
It comes.
But do me a favor, so I don't need to hear William talking about this ever again. Yeah. Just go buy the book. Yeah. Let's talk about something fun, guys. Let's start with a fun topic. Formula E driver caught using Ringer. We didn't cover this on this week's podcast, but I thought it was an interesting story. So you have this real Formula E Audi driver, a guy who drives a real race car, not a virtual race car. And he was competing in a virtual race, but he hired a ringer, essentially a professional esports player, to run the race for him. He has since been kicked out from his team. So he's been suspended from driving for his team. I mean, William, I don't know what you make of this, but it's like, it's funny because it's literally like why did he need the esports guy to race for him? I just don't get it. Does this mean esports racing car drivers are just better than normal racing car drivers?
I have so many questions. Like even the fine amount, $10,900. Like that's such a weirdly specific amount of money to be fined for a violation. Like I half expected to be some like internal like meme or something. But yeah, I mean, this is so cool to me. This story is like bad news, good news story in my mind, because it's bad news because it's sad. Like it's people cheating in an esport, and it goes back to a little bit. Esport has some integrity issues. And, there's been questions before in these remote tournaments, right? Are people using hack tools? Are they using unsupported devices? Are they even having another player play for them? Right. And now we have a real example of it happening in racing. So it's bad news. I think the good news here, and maybe arguably the cool piece of all of this, is it shows you how legitimate esports athletes are, that this particular driver, and arguably, look, I mean, if you guys haven't played the racing sim stuff, it is very close to the real thing. I mean,
this is reverse cheating, William. It's reverse cheating, right?
Well,
normally you would think the esports driver would go hire the real race car driver to run the race for him.
But here the esports guy is the marquee athlete. And the real race car drivers go like, oh, to get an edge, I better get those esports dudes to play for me. Which, by the way, if you think it's an edge in the virtual race, how long before it's an edge in the real race? I mean, quite seriously, like how long before there's not better crossover? Because if you think about it too, the digital racers can train in variable conditions more easily, right? They can train at higher intensities. They can perform and practice riskier moves because there's less risk for human life or damage. I just think like it goes back to virtual training has long been a promised land, and virtual competition has long been a promised avenue for training. And now you're seeing a weird convergence that the order of the day has flip-flopped.
Mike B. Cam said, how did he not think he'd get caught, essentially?
Yeah.
Like, I guess it's actually, you'd think, I wonder how he did get caught, because I feel like it's pretty easy to get away with this.
So my conspiracy theory is he meant to get caught, right?
So?
To bring more attention. Yeah. He wanted to win the race and then unmask and say, oh, it wasn't me. It was actually, this gamer, to bring attention to, just bring attention to the esport.
So some gaming
I don't know.
company
This is
was paying
kind of
him
a silly
more money
article
than his racing team, his real racing team, because he's somewhat thrown away his racing career, at least.
Wow.
How is that possible? You think that his racing team is not going to hire
Unless
him now
the racing
to race?
team was in on this. Oh, give him a slap on the wrist.
There you go.
Yeah,
bringing attention to the race.
Game publisher.
$10,900 fine. Like, we'll get you there.
So here's the question. Did it not make any of the earnings calls, Jeff? Are we not going to hear about this then?
I don't think this was material.
Material. Alex says, I created a YouTube channel just so I can chat with you guys here. I love this.
Adam,
is exactly what people should be doing.
Alex, I do have a question though, which is were you not using YouTube before this? Like what? What was like
hardcore gamers in the chat here.
Are we
Hardcore
a user
gamers.
acquisition funnel for Google now? Because if so, we'll be advertising Stadia before long, the way this goes. That was a good story. That was a fun one to kick us off. That was nice. That was lighthearted. And I love this inset article magic we're doing here. This is professional. Here we go.
Let's talk about this one, because William, you had some thoughts on this.
Yeah.
The article was Transcendentally Boring: The Joy of Job Simulation Games. And so they talk about how there's been this rise in what would seem like very, very boring games that just replicate some very boring, mundane task, like being a truck driver or being a farmer or but they replicate it in tremendous detail. And so people are drawn to these games, play these games. They have huge audiences, the ones that are successful. I think, William, you had an interesting angle on a question for Jeff on that one.
Yeah. So guys, for just as a reminder, for those who don't know, Jeff is an analyst with Stephens who covers a lot of the gaming public companies. You'll hear more from him in the podcast. We actually went through basically every public esports business that he covers, from Allied to Ubisoft, and sort of got his thoughts on them. But this one, to me, when I heard this, I thought this is definitely something I want to ask Jeff about, because this highlights how weird and impossible it is to predict the success of games, to me, right? Like, if I told you, like, I'm going to make a game, what millions of people want to do is drive a bus in excruciating detail, the same route again and again, you love riding on a bus. What would be better than riding on a bus? Driving the bus slowly, and yet these things are, like, they're legitimately popular. Like, they're not AAA popular, but they're legitimately titled. And by the way, many of them annually sequel with reasonable success. Farming Simulator, I think, has had 10 iterations. That makes it 10 times more long-lived than Heroes of the Storm, the greatest game of all time. So how does that one happen? But it goes to my thing. It's so weird. It's so difficult to predict hits in this industry. This underscores it for me. How do you, when you're valuing stocks, right, price out a new IP? How do you put a new IP value in, say, I know you don't, it's not public, but say, how do you value a Valorant for Riot Games, for example?
Yeah. I feel like we just spent like an hour talking about this. I almost wish people could hear the podcast and then hear this. But,
no, tease them, whet their appetite.
The reality,
they want to listen to the podcast.
That, a lot of these publishers have moved to fewer, bigger, better games. And what that has done is they have less releases per year. That takes away a lot of the risk. And, when you guys listen to the podcast, you'll hear, this gets bemoaned a lot by gamers and, by William and Paul. But the reality is investors kind of like it because it creates stable earnings, stable franchises where, when you put out a sequel, it's not going to be a flop. It's going to probably be a hit if you put out the next GTA. So what happened in talking, specifically to your question, how do we think about it? You definitely put, a high degree of conservatism to new games. We've seen in the past 2 years, a number of pretty high profile flops. You've had Anthem from EA, which was not good. That was a new IP. Ghost Recon Breakpoint was a flop. That wasn't quite a new IP, but they tried to go a new direction with the title. It flopped. Even with Fallout 76, they tried to go a different direction, be innovative, and totally flopped. So I don't know if that answers your question, but basically investors like to see, stable, profitable franchises. So you do have to haircut, when publishers take a chance, take a risk.
It's just so weird to me because it's just every time a new game comes out, it just seems impossible. Like, if I were gonna, and even if I were doing a venture scale investment and somebody came to me and said, hey, I'm going to make Farming Simulator. I think this game can do $20 million annually easily. And I think there's upside for this to be a $50 to $60 million recurring annual business, which I believe is roughly what Farm Simulator does. I would laugh that guy out of the room. I would be like, so who are you?
Who's playing it?
You have a mobile game. Here's $200,000. Go build it. Good luck.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But who's playing it? I will tell you, I downloaded Farming Simulator 2019 or whatever the latest was.
Good for you, Paul.
And I played it on stream once. This was when I was streaming a little bit more regularly.
Yeah.
And to this day, it's my best performing stream ever. It was a stream I did with Magix, who's like a pro Apex player. Like, we're both hardcore shooter players, and we both played Farming Simulator together. We had no clue what we were doing. It wasn't fun at all. But for some reason, people tuned in.
Like, this is a good question, actually. And this is something I've wondered for a while. What drives viewership? Is it the game or the streamer? Because part of me thinks it's actually the streamer, which, would then make sense if it was you and a popular guy, why you would have, pretty good viewership, even though it was a title that nobody gives a crap about.
That's a tough question, right? Because it also comes back to, like, when streamers move from one platform to the other, why don't they maintain their audience, right? If it's all about the streamer, why isn't Shroud still getting
I guess
40,000 people.
So there's three pieces. There's the game, the streamer, and the platform. Platform might be most, you can't defeat. If you go to a different platform, you can't win, if you're going to a worse platform. But the game might be more fungible, I guess.
Yeah, it's tricky because I think it varies from game to game, and it's all what how sub. But fundamentally, I think this is why I think we're so high in the podcast about Dr. Disrespect, because I think people who watch the doc would probably watch the doc make peanut butter, right? They'd probably watch. In fact, I would like to watch the doc.
It'd be pretty entertaining. Actually, I kind of want to watch the doc.
I literally I would tune into that, and so that is a very high level of affinity and stickiness. Whereas Fan is the best Heroes of the Storm streamer right now. Sorry, guys, I'll talk about Heroes of the Storm because I watch Fan, right? If there were a better player than him streaming, I would probably watch that guy because I'm watching him because he's just the best current Heroes of the Storm streamer, right? And I think one thing that's really tricky is a lot of times streamers don't really know which category they're in and how their user base breaks out until it's too late. And you see this all the time, right? Where the Mixer defections are a great example of people thinking they had a lot of brand loyalty where really they had game loyalty, but I actually think the funny thing in all of this is there's a third level of loyalty, which is the platform. And I think you've seen with Mixar that the platform loyalty is the strongest of all. That when I tune out, I'm still to say when I'm done watching Shroud or, Tfue, I still tune out somewhere else on Twitch. And that's the weird one to me that I don't have an explanation that makes a lot of sense. The stickiness of that Twitch ecosystem is so powerful. And I would love for the people who are listening in here to the live stream, if you have theories that you want to share about why Twitch has been so sticky when fundamentally it's just a URL and I can see the exact same thing at a different URL, please tell me, because I consider the stickiness of broadcasters the great unsolved frontier in esports right now. All the other terrestrial broadcasters, it's a pipes business. Twitch oddly doesn't look like a pipes business right now, except that is exactly how I would expect it to behave. So please drop some knowledge bombs here and I'll prepare to drink my, good boy milk because I want to learn.
I think you're just looking at it the wrong way, William. It's not a question of loyalty. It's a question of friction, right? That people are lazy and just don't want to look at Alex. He made a YouTube account just to come listen to this.
Yeah,
right? But there's a certain amount of friction that is required to move to a new platform, and you may overcome that friction because you're such a huge personality or playing a game I might like. But there's a whole bunch of people who would not even bother. That they're just too lazy, and they go, "I've got a Twitch account. This is good enough. If I want to watch Valorant, there's plenty of people playing Valorant. I'm not going to switch."
But this is the definition of a low shoelace cost event for me, because let's say I'm a fan of Ninja. And Ninja goes to Mixer. I have two choices, right? I can literally bookmark a different URL, which will take all of 30 seconds. I don't even have to make an account, basically. I can just go there and he'll be there, right? Bookmark a new URL, or I can go through the pain of discovering a new streamer and cycling through 2, 3, 4 people and waste 8, 10, 15 minutes finding another guy I like as much as Ninja. In my mind, it's just so clear that the shoelace cost lies with discovery on the incumbent platform and not with the switching to a different streaming platform. And clearly I'm wrong because that's not the observed behavior in the market. I'm just stunned. That's not the case,
Well, Might Be Cam made this comment on the farming simulator thing. He totally saw the same thing in a friend stream. 3 to 4 hardcore farming sim players joined and helped. But let's go back to that. I want to end on this story. Who are the people playing these hardcore sims? There's not that many farmers. There aren't, I don't know how many copies Farming Simulator sold, but there aren't that many truckers. There aren't that many.
Yeah,
what's this audience? Because the big publishers stay away from this entirely, right, Jeff? No one's touching.
I guess it depends how you want to define. The Sims is a big business for EA.
Yeah. But meaning hardcore simulation kind of market.
Yeah, it's weird to me. I guess it's my understanding of it. So I have an uncle who's super into Train Simulator, right? Super into Train Simulator. And my understanding is, look, it's just, certain professions have a mystique to them, right? Like farming is definitely one. There's an allure of getting back to the land, being in touch with nature, living where you work, working out in the field. And people, there's just a whole group of people that idolize farming as a lifestyle, right? And I think that's fair. There's actually a lot of farming that appeals, right? At the same time, farming is not a profession you sort of easily end up in, right? Like it's not like you magically get a plot of land and the expertise to manage a flock of 1,000 cattle, or even plant and rotate corn, right? It's pretty difficult. And so I think for a lot of people, they have this casual fascination. They were never able to experience it. It wasn't able to work for them. And now games are a way to glimpse into that world. And the importance of the verisimilitude and the detail and accuracy of the simulation is important, because I think it goes to the fantasy that when people play these games, I think everybody thinking in the back of their mind is, well, one day if I became a farmer, now I'd know what to do. Right now, I'd understand. I'm quite serious. Like part of the fun is you're not just learning how to farm Weibelbrock's mushrooms on the planet Ebelgrad, right? You're learning a real skill that presumably has some value, right? And I know that's a small piece of the value, but I may seem like a small piece of the value you get from playing Farm Simulator. But I truly believe at the end of the day, for the people who are playing it, they're playing it because they wonder what it would be like to have that job and what would they need to know to have that job. And that becomes part of the escapism, that learning and that experience,
Just to give you a sense of how deep the conversation on the podcast was, guys, this story, we never made it to this story. You would think this would be like a headline story on the podcast, but this is how much we took a deep dive on the public gaming companies that we didn't even end up talking about this. The article was from the Esports Observer talking about Riot Games adding in-game sponsor banners to League of Legends Esports. We all knew this was coming, right? I've seen a bunch of startups like trying to do this or advertising that they can do this. Riot is now doing it in-house. It seems unclear whether they're using any outside technology or not. It's not mentioned in the article.
What outside technology do you need? It's a skin. It's literally like you grafted it onto the mesh. And like if Riot needs outside technology for that, I have some things I can sell Riot.
No, but there are technology providers who are trying to take this to smaller publishers and pitch it as like,
and they do it via dynamic insertion. And everything. I know I'm being a little facetious.
No, but there is maybe a market for that among smaller publishers. But you're right. With Riot, it's obviously in house. Yeah. Jeff, if Riot's not a public company, right? So you don't follow them. But if EA or Activision or any of these guys came out with a similar announcement, obviously you'd be pretty bullish on this, I assume.
Yeah, the main takeaway here for me is it's not a controversial one. It just reinforces that in esports, the main winners are going to be the publishers, right? Because when you're thinking about esports, the majority of people are going to be watching it not at a stadium, not at an arena. And, when you're a tournament organizer, you own that arena. Like if you're Allied Esports, you can put up a sign that says MasterCard, but that only might get seen by the 10,000 people that maybe are in that arena. But the 30 million people watching online are only going to see the stuff that's in game. So it's just another example of the publisher holds kind of all the cards and holds the power here. So I think this is a genius by Riot, smart. The question, because I could see where this could go wrong if they were putting this in League of Legends when it wasn't an esport, because people don't want to be pulled away from the immersion factor. So advertisements work great in FIFA and Madden, because guess what? When I watch sports on TV, there's advertisements everywhere. Like that's just the way sports work. But when I'm, playing Apex, I don't want to see like all of a sudden over my buddy's head, like a giant MasterCard image. Like that's annoying. That's not the way it's supposed to work. So it's a slippery slope and people have to be careful. But in this instance, it's a very smart. It's where this was all heading, and it reinforces what we already knew.
William, why hasn't Rocket, like, because you're in Rocket League now, you have a Rocket League team.
I love Rocket League.
Why hasn't Rocket League done this? Right? Rocket League literally has an arena, sort of like a football stadium or a soccer field, or right? Like it's exactly the same format with boards that go around, right? Why haven't they plastered that with advertising?
Honestly, I'm sure my answer is going to be unpopular. Absolutely should. No excuse for not doing it. It's free money. It literally is free money. I think the bigger issue is maybe the publisher having to sell that sponsorship space, right? And needing to kind of recognize revenue around that and choosing to add an FTE there versus say, for a new content patch. I think the biggest challenge with publishers is there's all these incremental monetization things they should do. The challenge is it's so hard to keep up with your weekly or biweekly update schedule. It's almost impossible to do all the around the edges monetization incremental things you should do when you literally have to launch a new car cases next week. Or, Fortnite, you have to launch a new gun. And by the way, it still isn't clearing testing. It's making the guy clip through the world, right? The player, it's the teleporter, and like they fall through the skybox. This is why I'm a big fan. And we talked about these infrastructure businesses, right? This is why I do a data analytics company. This is why, I think any of the infrastructure things are smart plays, because these are all things publishers should tackle. They just don't have the return to do it versus core content pipeline. And also all of these things can be tappable at scale. So I was being facetious about the dynamic ad insertion, but the reality is it should be one company that does dynamic ad insertion on any planner, map, mesh, flat surface for every video game, because they can do the sponsorship structuring. They can do the technology to make it scalable and easy to deploy. And the conversation with the publisher should be, hey, we'll guarantee you that you can make 10 cents more per viewer on your podcast, and we're going to share it 50-50. Sound good? That should be the conversation, not how does Psyonix figure out how to free up enough resources away from dev hires to shoehorn in this increment. Like, it's not the way the world's going to work. It's the same.
This is kind of the irony, right? Like the team owner here wants to see the additional advertising and the additional revenue, but the publisher doesn't care. Like it's probably not even, it's not enough money for them probably to even bother hiring a salesperson for. Right?
I need to be very careful.
You made the point, right? Like they're better off making another skin and selling that skin. But this is the power dynamic that exists, right? Like the publisher doesn't care. They'll focus their efforts where revenue is maximized for them, right? But you don't make extra money off a skin as a team owner, whereas you potentially could touch some of the revenue in terms of advertising.
Mm-hmm.
So here's an interesting thing, if I could jump in for a sec. It would be interesting if someone, I think there's a company, I forget the name of it, that's trying to do this, if an individual streamer could make it such that there were ads in their games, but only their games, right? So like their fans could see them, but it's not in the actual, like if I were playing Apex, it wouldn't be there in the consumer version. But when I'm on the stream, there's some plug-in to Twitch where I can then put them in as the streamer so my fans can see them.
Yeah.
That kind of solves that problem, what you're saying.
What's the incentive, though, for the publisher to create those tools, though?
Because they wouldn't be creating it. The third party would, and they would just be basically saying, like, check, it's on.
Twitch extensions had talked about doing that, I think. Look, there's there needs to be better advertising in games. We get it. By the way, I think there also needs to be better advertising in sports. Like, I think we can do cooler things now with projection on player jerseys and things that should change the way sports are inserted into games. There is another revolution coming for advertising with things like the deep fake technology that's going to allow dynamic insertion of properties. That's going to be true across the board. But going back to your point about teams and publishers, you're right. For an individual publisher, it doesn't make sense. But all these infrastructure plays and teams, I sort of see as an infrastructure play. And I don't want to rehash the team non-team discussion because we do that every time. And there's a great comment from Steve Blixendorfer.
Yeah,
we're going to talk about in a second. I just want to say it makes sense across multiple things, right? That's why you don't have a team that's in one game. You try to be a team that's in 5, 10. And if you could be in all the games cost effectively, you would be, because your play it's a scale play, right? It's what doesn't make sense for one publisher might make sense for somebody to aggregate across the industry.
Steve's question is a good one. Steve, ex-guest of the podcast too.
What a great one, Steve.
How would you guys go about advising businesses on the cost value of in-game ads and sponsorships? I'm curious, William, your take on this.
Yeah. I mean, this is a really, really good question. I think there's an enormous amount of sponsorship value to be unlocked, right? And I think you see that by all the large deals and the rapid growth of sponsorship in the space. I think if it were a business that was totally fresh to esports advertising, I would say come with 3 North Stars, right? Come with the North Star that you're going to make mistakes, because it's still an early industry. You probably don't really know, what is going to work and what isn't. And even if you have an agency or somebody advising you, they might not even be the best agency, and you probably don't have a way of knowing it. So go into it assuming that you're going to have some successes and failures. And because of that, the second thing I'd say is go into it willing to take some risks, right? Maybe don't just do the obvious high money sponsorship of League of Legends, but try to spread some of your cash around with other event driven activations, targeted streamer long tail, whatever it is, to see what else might work, because this is a high risk area for you most likely. So you might as well maximize the learning from it. And then the third thing I would say is buy to try, right? Don't let anybody lock you into a 2-year agreement, right? Start with the minimum purchase, 3 to 6 months. If you can, have it tied to conversion. Most people in esports today won't do esports conversion deals, so you probably can't get it. But if you could, ask for it. And think about it as just like, there's portions in your marketing budget that you would call iterative marketing, where you're going to spend for a lower return over the short term, but a higher return in a long-term blended cost of customer acquisition. You need to treat the esports marketing the same way. Now, that's for businesses that are new to the space. Businesses that have been in the space, it's a totally different ballpark, but most advertisers are still new to esports. And so I'd say start there.
I mean, Steve's comment, William, really was around, or question was really around in-game ads, right? And that adds a level of like,
totally
no, your answer was a good one. I'm not saying, I think it was a very good answer and a very useful answer. But like the in-game ad piece, the problem is these are walled gardens, and the technologies aren't there really to open up those walled gardens effectively yet. Like I've seen some companies trying to do this, overlay ads onto a game without actually having access to the code, the underlying code of the game, or changing it in some way. But these are still very early technology. So like advising businesses in terms of in-game ads, to me, probably still too early.
But I'd be more blunt. Don't do it. Like, don't do it, right? We're not yet sure how gamers are going to perceive it. Yeah. We're not yet sure if it's going to be a positive look for your brand or a negative brand. If there is an ROI, I'm candidly doubtful about how effective the ROI is going to be in the short term, because you always want things to be clickable, right? And like, I as far as I'm aware, you can't click that MasterCard ad in League, so you're going to have trouble driving a DTC funnel.
Imagine if you could, every time by accident you click there.
Oh my God, that would be so great.
It opens up a browser to a MasterCard page.
You go to Baron and like you've accidentally signed up for 3 new credit cards. but look, I think that, and my suspicion is the companies that are getting this aren't paying very much for it. They're getting it as a throw into a larger deal. And maybe they're doing it to be perceived cutting edge, because this would be the sort of thing, if I were, still at a large company like Hasbro, I'd love to go back and report to, the CEO on and say, look how innovative we are. We were the first business ever to do in-game advertising with X, right? I view these as it's plumage advertising today. It makes you look good. It makes you look innovative. I don't really expect it's going to drive bottom line in the short term.
And to be fair, MasterCard's doing it because they're doing other game sponsorship and activations. Like this is not the only thing they're doing. So they're already pretty savvy about the space. Let me just hide that for a second. Mike Becam said, much more targeted advertising would be pretty cool. Twitch plugin linked to the viewer's Amazon. Yeah, I mean, that's the promise of, in-game advertising in general, or at least advertising overlaid on a game, is you could make it very, very targeted, right? If I watch a soccer game today and the guy's got a Fanta ad on his jersey, I can't buy Fanta in the US, right? But if I'm watching FIFA, I can show Fanta to the players in Europe and I can show Pepsi to the players in the US. Like there's very nice sort of geo-targeting abilities when you're talking all digital, both in the product itself and the ad.
What's weird to me is the person who has the most benefit for getting the clickable advertising right today, I would argue, is the publisher themselves, right? Because the most direct and relevant purchase you can make from footage off of a game is the digital items and skins the player's using. So I would love, if I'm watching a Caldor TV Heroes of the Storm tournament. Sorry, guys, you got a lot of heroes today. I've been quiet about it for a while.
I'm out of banners making fun of heroes.
I would love to be able to click the Cassius skin and have it prop a purchase for my account. And I would even love it more if it gave me a 10% discount because I'm buying it live and it's a one-time, integrate through Twitch, use your bits here. It's weird to me because given how tightly coupled microtransactions are to gameplay, the microtransaction purchases feel to me like they belong in broadcast. And the fact that that's unsolved right now is just, it's strange to me. And again, it goes back to my whole thing, which is publishers are resource constrained. They're massive multi-billion-dollar businesses. they are probably more than anybody else in the esports industry hurting for bandwidth to do anything other than title development. Consumers are so hungry and demanding today. Like I feel bad for them. Like, honestly, like I get fed up if there's not something new in my game every 2 days. You know what I mean? Like, you know.
I just want to read Alex's comment here. Makes a lot of sense for brands to do this within esports specific builds. Non-endemic brands especially need to maximize the perceived ROI in a space that is still proving itself in their eyes. You know, I like this comment because I wanted to add on to what William said in response to Steve's question, that there are tools and companies. I'm involved with one, so full disclosure. I'm involved with a company called Athlane, and to me, they're a great resource for brands, endemic and especially non-endemic, who are looking to venture and spend dollars in the space, to give them confidence in terms of where to spend it efficiently, and then how to track the ROI on the other end in a very kind of simple and meaningful way, so that you have confidence that the dollars being spent there aren't just hype and aren't just sort of fluffy, and we're not doing it just because gaming's cool. So there are tools that are out there like Athlane that can give confidence to brands who may be skeptical of the space.
Are we sure that like players want ads in the games? Or are we talking specific to esports? Because it's like I get the feeling like
want it or not though. Who, like I don't. It's not up. Like, does the guy playing soccer want his jersey covered like head to toe in?
I don't want ads every time I queue up, you know, another YouTube video, but I get them. You know, it's just the world we're in today is consumers are willing to accept a certain amount of injected content.
I guess it depends what we're talking about, right? If we're talking about, are we talking about in the context of an esport, like, you know, when there's a tournament going on or someone playing on Twitch, there's ads in that stream? Or are we talking like when I open Heroes of the Storm, I start seeing ads bombarded at me? Because that people will hate. Like, we know that.
How can you say that? You listen to EA's earning calls every quarter where they're finding ways to monetize every little bit of every game that they put out there, but you're offended by an in-game ad?
So I am not offended by it, but I know that people will hate it, right? People hate microtransactions, and those are generally
them anyways.
Right, but you're usually buying something you want. With ads, it's like, I don't know, it's a little bit of a tougher bridge, I think, for people.
Not really. How hard is it to believe that EA, in some iteration of their microtransaction model, says you can spend 25 EA bucks to get this skin, or you can watch these next 35 ads and spend only 5 EA bucks?
Then you're just a mobile game.
Well,
do they make anything else?
Isn't the story too of modern monetization has been the creep of mobile monetization schemes into games?
It's true.
Mobile is so successful in part because it had a better monetization mechanism than traditional games for so long. And traditional games, Overwatch, cough, still have yet to learn that this is a better way to move products to consumers. Can I just say the thing that really bugs me the most about the MasterCard thing, though it's small, but I get to nitpick. This isn't the podcast, so whatever. How unimaginative is it? How unimaginative is it to drop the logo in? You know, there was a really cool opportunity here to require a different standard for in-game advertising in League. And to say, you know what, MasterCard, you can advertise in the game, but MasterCard has to become part of the League of Legends lore. It has to exist in Runeterra. It has to have a reason to be there. And it has to be, it's MasterCard can be the bank of Runeterra. I'm fine with it. We can do whatever you want, but you have to this has to be done in world. And there's great examples of this, like Coca-Cola. If you can pull this up, this is so cool. How Coca-Cola came to Disney World, the Star Wars experience in Disney World. They launched an entirely new Coca-Cola can with Urabesh writing on it in an entirely new format. And I've criticized it in the past, but as time has gone on, I've changed my view on it. And I thought, you know what, at the end of the day, Coke was going to be sold at that Star Wars exhibit, right? And they could have done it two ways. They could have done it the low. There you go. Yeah, that's right. They could have done it the low effort way, or they could have done it this way. And I think the world is a better place for Urabesh Coke. I do. I think it's, and
until you realize each one of these is like $6.99, but yeah.
Well, it's Disney, come on, right? But like I wish MasterCard had done this. I wish, particularly for a brand where Riot, surprisingly, I think, is so cognizant of the value of their IP and that they're creating IP. I'm surprised for them to let let the door open a little like this. It's a minor nitpick. I mean, it can be changed later on. I just think that would have been so much cooler, you know?
I agree. But Riot's not really like Riot's not Disney either. Right?
No,
I would argue they're better at creating new IP than they are at mining existing. If anything, I would have expected this from Activision Blizzard with all their properties long before anyone else.
Yeah.
Like Activision Blizzard should be the company doing this. They're the ones extracting every last dollar, from 20-year-old IP.
Yeah. Well,
I don't think they're not doing it because for some altruistic reason. I think they've thought about it, and they're probably fearful it's going to push people away. Or particularly with mobile games, there is a ton of data science that goes into it because 95% of your people, or sorry, 80% of your revenue, even for like Zynga, comes from in-game spend. So they have to be damn sure that before they show you an ad, you're not going to spend. Because if people start spending, they can spend thousands and thousands of dollars. So way higher ARPU than they can ever get from an ad. So they need to know that you're not a spender. So, at some point this could happen, but I think like they're going to dip their toes in very gently. Like, when actually good example of this, when Activision bought King back in 2016, King had no advertising business. And a big part of the thesis back then was, hey, they're going to start putting in ads. And from 2016 till now, that business is still less than $100 million business. And that was a big core pillar of what they want to do with King. So they'll be careful when they're doing this, I think.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Guys, I have to highlight this. Love the podcast, guys. Keep up the great work. I mean,
thank you, Joe. Joe, ask us a question. Don't just flatter us. Tell us.
No, I'm fine with just the flattery.
Well, then keep flattering us. Don't send one compliment. Send flowers, chocolates, and say we look great.
Everyone knows what works with William now.
I'm 100%. I'm easy. Flattery is the doorway to every heart, but particularly mine.
Guys, let's talk about
flattery and pre-ordering the book of these cards.
Oh my God. These live streams are bad. They give him more opportunity to shill his book.
Honestly, I've gotten in everything I like in 15 minutes. This is my dream.
Well, Adam made a comment earlier. I'll just put it up here. He goes, now to hear the phrase hot garbage and I'll have BOE bingo. We should print and send out cards to fans and listeners that they can follow along and check things off. Actually, Alex here has a question or a comment. Good point, William. I chalk this up to a first-gen activation. Brand marketers in-house and at agencies can get more creative over time. Needs time. Set the bar low and build up from there.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's true. You're probably right. It's just get your baseline, get your temperature check. You don't want in-game advertising to have failed because people didn't like banking and League of Legends, lore. You want it to have failed because people didn't like the ads that were, inserted into the game experience. That's fair.
It's a bit of a lame excuse. It's a bit of a lame excuse, right? Like it feels. I agree with you, William. It feels lazy, and I agree, Alex. It's a first-gen activation, but. Like these, why are we still doing first gen activations in general, right? Like, It's not like advertising is new. It's not like digital advertising is new. People should be a little bit savvier and realize that the assets at hand allow for more creative things. But I don't know if this is the way it's going, where we build up to it and build up to more creative things.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about FINRA. This is some good news here.
Good news. This is good news.
I don't know.
It's just a weird story.
I know.
Ex-Merrill broker suspended over undisclosed esports gaming business. So this guy, Christopher Rumaye, agreed to a suspension and $15,000 fine to settle charges of engaging in outside business activities. The activity spanned 5 years, and he violated these FINRA rules requiring brokers to provide written notice of outside business activities. Now, the outside business activities in question here were he purchased a video sports gaming league alongside a client without permission from the firm. And in fact, what it was an investment in the Renegades. And basically now he's been barred from being a broker because he convinced his clients to invest in the Renegades and invested alongside them. which counted as outside business activities. So, I mean, the Renegades are owned by Beasley, are they not, William?
I thought they were. Yeah, isn't this a Beasley thing? Yeah, I think it's Beasley.
Yeah, I think Beasley was one of the investors.
Yeah, there it is. Beasley's right.
The publication also identified the outside investor as Beasley Broadcast Group.
It's just you wouldn't know that like owning an esports team and then soliciting investment in it was a conflict in the broker dealer roles. Like, I mean, I don't know. It's just, but I also sort of understand maybe like, and I'm not making an excuse for this guy because obviously I think it's not okay what happened, but like esports does occupy such a weird liminal space in some of our mental thoughts. Like it's possible that you just don't look at it like a Fidelity or a, Merrill Lynch, and you just say, you know what, like this is so different. It's a different asset class. What does it even mean to be an owner of it? Maybe this isn't something I have to, talk, be as transparent with. I don't know, but
I like it. I think FINRA's been listening to my comments on the podcast and is punishing people for team ownership, as they should.
Is that why you put the story in here so you can make that comment?
90% of our story selection is for Paul to say clever things about the articles, and 10%.
I don't write these stories, guys. I'm not writing these.
Yeah, stop it. You're so
I'm not making these stories up.
Yeah.
Don't you find though that Beasley, who can we talk about them for a second in the context of this story? This is a company that owns radio shows, right? Like radio stations.
Yeah.
And has made two relatively large bets in the space.
Yeah.
Renegades and the Houston Outlaws.
Yeah.
Like an Overwatch League team. Are we convinced that they don't know what they're doing now? Like, is this enough evidence that they should probably have stuck to radio or have...
No, I mean, like, we can't be too critical of these businesses taking risk. Like, what we need to do is reward the risk-taking behavior. Like, good for this. A company like Beasley, which I would say is a bit staid, anchored in old media, is trying to transition to new media. That's a gold star. Like, you get to have some cake. The downside with that is that, yeah, the execution was not what you would want, out of it. And that's okay. I think the thing here, and this is where you really see some is this a commitment to learn and master the medium, or is this a, we failed, let's hide, right? Because ironically, I think the right thing for a Beasley to do in the face of this is to double down on their conviction that the space was correct, to recognize they may need to do more or different things in the space, and to learn from their mistakes and continue to grow onwards and upwards. And, I think it's often criticized when businesses invest into failure, but I actually think it's one of the best things sophisticated businesses do. I really do.
I agree, William.
Yeah,
I agree. The question is, why do so many seem to go alone?
Because it's easy. It's easy. It's easy to run in first and look like a hero, and run out when you realize the building's on fire. Those are the two easiest things to do in the world.
I mean, on the podcast, I will say, I'll tease it. Like, we talked about Activision Blizzard and Jeff's sort of, interactions with management at Activision Blizzard regarding Overwatch League and what I consider to be a failure, and what they essentially spin as a learning exercise. Is this something we're going to see more from big companies, Jeff? Like, do you think Beasley will trip here a little bit and they may continue investing in the space, and other big companies will invest in the space, and some may trip and some may succeed massively? But are we always going to chalk it up to, we're learning?
I think so. I mean, I think to William's point, we can't knock a company like Beasley that, let's face it, they do radio broadcasting. Like, that's kind of I don't want to say a dying business, but it's a dying business. So they're looking at the landscape. Hey, we're a media company. Well, what's the most exciting, fastest growing, going to be the largest area of media? I think in all of our opinions, and probably anyone who listens to this podcast, it's gaming, it's esports. They say, okay, I want to be involved in esports. What's the best way to get exposure? Well, there's a league out there that is professionally managed, has great ownership from other owners. They're run by one of the biggest companies in the space. Everything makes sense. Now, we can argue clearly the way things went, but it's very hard to argue with the process of their thoughts. So I don't want to knock them, and I do think you'll probably see other big media companies getting involved in the space. And for our sake, we should want that, because that's what you want.
Philadelphia Fusion, you see every major Korean media company and esports. where it's going. I like these guys. Like I said, I just, it's the conviction. It's respect the choice that you've made. Recognize that you were never, very few things are successful at the beginning. Like, believe me, the first time we try to do anything, we're students, not masters. It takes time to sit on the Jedi Council. Anakin, 4 whole movies, and he still didn't get there. Is that a good Star Wars joke? Do we like that? Come on.
Is that a joke?
I thought that was good.
Oh my God. William, stay away from the comedy. Can we talk, Hillary? I want to know what Hillary meant by this. So if Hillary's still in here, I want to understand this comment. I assume you're talking about William here. He'd better convince Paul to invest in Vainglory's servers, or are we talking about Vainglory? Guys, I'm not a mobile gamer here. It's a mobile game, right?
Yeah, Vainglory. Yep. It's the League of Legends clone. That was done by Super
Evil Megacorp, but they sold it recently. I'm pretty sure.
Who owns it now?
Not Super Evil. Let's Google.
Is it one of the big publishers, Jeff? Yeah. It's not one of the big publishers, right? They're still independent, or
they were sold to someone. I mean, it's not a public company.
Rogue Games. Yeah, Rogue Games.
I mean, Hillary, if you listen to the podcast, I'm so long-term bearish on mobile. You have no idea. Like, I get it. It's making a ton of money for a lot of people right now, but to me, it's so short-term. And when I say short-term, that could mean 5-10 years. Like, long-term could be 20 or 30 years. I refuse to believe that 20 years from now, we're still going to be, sitting on this playing a game. Like, to me, that I just refuse to believe this is how we'll be.
But you could say the same thing about consoles, couldn't you?
I don't game on consoles either. So.
Paul is there it is.
I mean, you could say that. So any device, you could say that about. There will be another platform.
But to me, mobile is a stopgap. It's a gateway drug. It succeeds in a lot of ways.
Mobile's entry level. It's an educational tool. It's I think one of the great problems in gaming, and I can't believe it gets to this.
I'm going to leave this up. Mike B. Cam, thank you.
Thanks, Mike B. Cam.
I'm just going to leave this up the rest
leave
of
that forever. I'll get the face tattoo. It's probably always applicable. One of the greatest insights I ever saw, was just controllers over time, right? And you start with, Atari, which is like basically a button, even pre-Atari, it's basically 1 or 2 buttons. Nintendo, 2 buttons and a D-pad. Super Nintendo, 4 buttons, 2 shoulder buttons, and a D-pad. Today, I don't have a controller by my desk, which is weird. Like, dear God,
real gamer.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that's right. Yep, got my Black Mamba mouse. That's all I need. It's difficult if you didn't get on that curve back in 1985. It's hard to come up that curve today. Right. If you're somebody who isn't part of the game, it's hard. I truly believe it's difficult. And yes, kids learn it and everything, and you get it and you solve it. But fundamentally, this was in part successful because touchscreen interfaces are really, really, really good and intuitive. And my 3-year-old gets them. Right.
So because they emulate the simple 2 and 3 button controls that were around 20 years ago.
Exactly. So when I look at this, I truly think this is the equivalent of the Nintendo 1985 controller. It's the basic, most intuitive, direct, lowest point cost of access into the industry that hooks people on the idea of gaming. But I believe you're creating and educating gamers who over time are going to want more. And by the way, I think that's been proven by the quality of mobile games gets better, guys. Like, I know we like to make fun of like Raid Shadow Legends and everything, but like Raid Shadow Legends is night and day a better experience than Infinity Blade, which was the marquee mobile Unity engine powered title back when the iPhone is like, you can't compare the two. You cannot compare the two. So this is happening. The upward drift is taking time, it's disruptive. I don't like disruptive innovation. That's a separate conversation. I don't think it's a real theory, but this is the steel mini mills all over again. This is innovation. The bottom market in a long time leads the top. And I think there'll be input shift and media shift that will obscure this change. But I do think this is the on-ramp.
I think we also have to differentiate mobile games versus console experiences on mobile, like a Call of Duty mobile. Yeah. Because there are examples in certain countries where consoles are, 1, too expensive or not prevalent. where, you have these like a Free Fire. There's 80 million daily active users of Free Fire. Like those people think they're gamers. They're not like, oh, I wish I had, for them, that's gaming. But then there's also another piece of the market where it's like, we're talking about the Candy Crushes, the Words with Friends. Like, I don't think like my 60-year-old mom who plays Words with Friends, like she's not going to all of a sudden go pick up a console and become a quote unquote gamer. So that piece of the market is its own kind of thing. And then you have the console experiences on mobile that are becoming more prevalent. And those are maybe the people that William, you're talking about, where like the evolution where they transition eventually to console.
Are they not? I'm convinced even older gamers skill up over time. It's just they have less sort of life and gaming experience to go. But I'm convinced that even if you start with, Tack to Touch Candy Crush, you grow out of that over time. Just like gamers started with Tetris, but Tetris is not a major category of gaming today,
I was going to hold on. I want to address this first. Adam loves the Star Wars reference, so let's just get that out of the way. Then Hillary asked, and this we can put to everybody. She asked, where will we be? What's the most optimistic vision, Paul, in 20 years? So for mobile, I guess, is what we're referring to here. My simple view is the 20-year vision is much more immersive gaming than what we have today. That eventually gaming will be able to engage all of our senses, so sight, sound, smell, touch, even mobility, in a way that gaming is not doing today in any way. Like it's the Star Trek holodeck future that I talk about all the time. And to me, that's where gaming converges, because if you can do that, there's very little incentive to want to do anything else. Now, that may require pretty powerful hardware, yes. So there will still be a market, in third world countries for mobile games potentially and things like that address. But to Jeff's point, like those 80 million gamers, right, that play Free Fire, you're telling me if I told them, hey, I can take away your phone and give you a state-of-the-art gaming PC, you think most of them are going to say, no, I want to hang on to my phone and play Free Fire? Like they're just, I doubt it, right? The block here is accessible, relatively cheap, powerful hardware. That's the only reason to still be playing on a mobile phone, is because access to that is difficult. And I think that's only going to get more pronounced over time. And the console market gets swallowed even earlier, right? Because the consoles now are just relatively underpowered standardized PCs. Like, to me, this gets completely overtaken by PCs in general. So look, I see a future where PC does dominate, and just about everyone will be looking for those very immersive experiences. I think mobile will have a place in my grandma's kind of hyper casual gaming market. And the mobile experience might power some of the immersive gaming. Like as these get more powerful, they will expand beyond the screen that's in front of them. They will be able to power other input methods and other output methods. So that's where I think it's going. Julian says he loves William's background.
Thanks, Julian. It's not my favorite location on Azeroth, but it's where I own my first house. So,
Adam says, I'm waiting to sync all my assets into a Sword Art Online or Ready Player One style VR. It's coming.
Yeah.
Ready Player One style VR is just a matter of time. It's just a matter of time for technology to figure it out, and technology will figure it out. There's zero question in my mind. They're all solvable problems. Like everything today that seems impossible, all fundamentally solvable by technology.
Yeah, the greatest. Thanks, Hillary. By the way, product placement for. I think it's my green screen is opening out my arm here. It looks good though. It looks good. Look, in my mind, and I'm not cognizant of this enough in my business activities. In my mind, the greatest ticking time bomb here is how radical and how fast that shift will come, because the immersion has to be better than today. It doesn't have to be that much better for things to cascade very rapidly, like very rapidly. We are getting dangerously close to that tipping point. Like I said, it doesn't have to be Ready Player One for you to want to switch over. I would argue if there were if there was a reasonable approximation of tactile feedback, some sort of solve for room scale movement, and slightly better refresh rates of existing headsets for untethered experiences, we would be there, right? We would. That's like, those things don't sound hard to solve to me. There's certainly big puzzles, right? Like, I admit it's going to be difficult to figure out the force feedback tactile glove that gives us what we want. There's my tattoo again. But like, that's it. Like, that's it. Because fundamentally, the quality of experiences in the digital world is going to be so awesome. Even if on a one-to-one experiential level, it's not as good as real life, we'll make the jump. Because guess what, guys? Hate to break it to you, video games on a one-to-one experiential level aren't as good as real life, but they're good enough. And so we sink hours and sometimes years of our lives into them. VR is very close to that moment. Like, and it's gonna be so wild. When we slip, it's gonna be like right down the water slide.
I guess if I could just quick, I mean, I think the immersive games will get more immersive, but you will still have bite-sized experiences. And as long as people are still going about their lives and commuting and working, you are still going to have people that are going to want 10 minutes with Candy Crush or 5 minutes with, Puzzlescapes and Homescapes. So I think you'll still have both until we, if we get to a Ready Player One world, then all bets are off. But I think that's a while down the line.
That's a very different business opportunity, the fun time filler, right? Like, then you're talking about King is a cracked.com business, right? Doesn't mean it's not a reasonable business, but it's hardly charting the future of entertainment as a medium, right? Yeah. It's the modern equivalent of Mad Libs, right? It's fine. I'd be proud to run a business like that. It can be a very successful business. It's not exactly changing, the way we're going to consume media.
But to be fair, but at the same time, I mean, it's a little. It's VR has how many players total right now? Like a couple million, and King has 100 million people that play every day. So it's a little.
But that's what I mean. The big point is this is the thinking that I fall into a lot. Is yes, the numbers are terrible right now. Yes, we're not there right now. And somebody asked a question. Might be Cam said, how much will cost be a factor? Cost is an easy solve for me. The answer is add 5 years. I really truly believe that whenever the tech is there. Yes, cost is a factor. It will be solved in 5 years. So whenever we have it and you say, geez, that premium experience is pretty amazing. Wouldn't that be great to have in my home? Add 5 years from that date. And that's when it will slow short-term adoption. But tech is so fast to solve and get the cost out on these things. It's so fast. And candidly, the price of success is going to be so valuable that these things will be subsidized so quickly. Right. They will be subsidized so quickly by manufacturers and owners who recognize that if they can get you on their particular platform, they have you locked in, that the cost will be out in 5 years.
And just to address your point, Jeff, like when the tipping point hits, if you look at the adoption of any medium like TV, radio, it's always a pretty flat line and then a massively vertical line, right? Like it's very rarely this slow buildup over time. As soon as some of these things are figured out, as soon as some of the technology hurdles are figured out, I think you're going to see very, very fast adoption. And we're starting to see hints of it already. Like when William says we're close, I believe we're close. You can't find an Oculus Quest anywhere. Good luck buying one. Sold out everywhere and has been almost since its release. Yeah. So the numbers are still relatively small, relative to the mobile kind of, because it's still a $500 or $400 device. But I think we're not that far off. We're not in the grand scheme of things.
I guess the point I was trying to make, is like mobile phones might not be the platform of the future. It might be something else. But mobile game-like experiences, those quick, fast, quick bite kind of games, will probably exist maybe within the virtual world that you're talking about. That was my point.
Potentially, yeah. Look, this next question from Julian, I really want to target Jeff on this one because I think it's perfect. I don't want William to answer this.
Yeah, thanks,
William
Jeff.
is slightly, but you sit on these analyst calls, you follow Activision Blizzard as part of your job. Thoughts on the long-term health of Heroes of the Storm? Is Blizz checked out, or do they have a plan?
So
what is Blizzard?
I hate to. I have no. I am only the same knowledge that everyone else has, but I hate to say this. I think I've covered Activision for 2 years now, and the number of times I've ever spoken to an investor or the company about Heroes of the Storm is zero. I have a full model of Activision, and everyone builds it out by game. Within the Blizzard segment, I model Diablo, I model Overwatch, I model Warcraft, I model Diablo Immortal, and then there's a little line called Other. And within that Other, there's some sort of baked-in assumption for Heroes of the Storm.
And be honest, Other is just a fixed value times 10% each year.
Yeah, that Other is just a plug to get to the right number.
You made Other, William. You made Other.
It's a start. I mean,
it's something.
It's not a footnote. It's not
it's not a footnote.
Yeah, but I would say, I guess to be serious, it is emblematic of what you guys will hear about this on the podcast, of potentially a bigger problem at Blizzard / at Activision. That why didn't they win the MOBA genre? Like why is League of Legends the beast in MOBA, and why is it not Blizzard, when clearly, it all kind of came out of Blizzard to begin with, so I do think that Heroes of the Storm should be a cautionary tale for Activision investors.
To me, I'm surprised, and this is so weird, but like, I can't believe I'm saying this. I'm surprised they don't sell it. Like, I'm surprised that these companies don't have what I would call like more of a failure mitigation strategy, where they recognize that for them, it only makes sense to monetize the title above X million ARPU, right? And Y million user base, right? And this isn't at those metrics, but at the same time, we joke about it. It has a reasonable user base as a game. I think there's probably 2 to 3 million people that play that game, right? There's probably a publisher in a community somewhere that can do that and better monetize that asset. And I know with Heroes of the Storm in particular, it's tied to Blizzard IP and there's sensitivities that are going to prevent it. But I'm always curious as to why you don't see more sublight. Because by the way, when I was in the toy industry, this was like the rule of the day. Have an old property that you still have a fan base for, that you have no clue how to make money out. Go to a specialist toy licensor who'll make He-Man toys for you and cut you in on 30%. And I'm surprised there's not more of this sophisticated sub-licensing of what I would call vaulted properties.
Yeah. In a live service business, it's just hard because, it's not as simple as like making a new game or, printing a couple more action figures. Like, you need to keep the community alive, and that takes development costs. So I think it is a little more difficult. You do see that, like Vainglory, the game we talked about before, that's a perfect example. And there are companies, in mobile that I know that do this, and there's some in console where they'll like take sort of like quote unquote dead games and kind of like basically cut out all but the problem is what they do is they don't invest in live services. What they would do is buy Heroes of the Storm for like $10 million and basically shut down all R&D and be like, well, the idiots that are still playing it are going to stick around and spend money. So we're going to spend $0. And I'm being facetious. I don't mean to call you an idiot, obviously.
No.
The people that stick around are going to stick around and spend a little money. So you basically cut your expenses to 0. And it's almost like an NPV problem where, you just do the math.
So Willie, maybe that's the play. Maybe, do you think Bobby Kotick would be open to a $10 million offer for Heroes of the Storm?
Dude, Bobby, if you're listening, like the check is written and signed. I know people, believe me, it's not just me. There's 2 other people who agree with me. Like I'm serious, Bobby. If you take one thing away from the Business of Esports podcast,
but there's a legitimate question in here, though, Jeff. Do you think Activision Blizzard would ever do that? Because we talk on this week's podcast, which will come out tomorrow, about how they're very great on the acquisition side and making acquisitions to power growth. Do you think divesting of assets that have not performed is something that they would look at or have looked at?
Not in this case particularly, because as far as I know with Heroes of the Storm, there's a lot of the lore from Warcraft. So it's like you don't want, it's the Disney problem. You don't want other people playing with your heroes, pun intended. But I think no in this case. And what we've seen in the past with Activision, they shut down brands, right? They shut down Tony Hawk. They shut down Skylanders. They shut down, a whole host of different brands.
They're willing to kill.
But over time, what they do is if there's nostalgia, they bring them back with little remasters, and they're doing with Tony Hawk this year with Spyro, and they can put them out, put very little budget into it, and sell, 2, 3, 4 million copies. And if you only spent $5 million, $10 million on development, 4 million copies, you're making, call it $200 million. You spent whatever, 20 million to develop it, a little bit on marketing. That's a profitable business and can kind of be incremental to your margins. So I think they would go down that route versus, spinning it out. Unfortunately, sorry, Wayne.
No, you're right. But it's an interesting question of publishers. I'm surprised. I think publishers are surprisingly unsophisticated in how they manage their vaulted IP. Like and I know, I think it comes from the relative immaturity of the industry, because I think you see in more legacy entertainment mediums, there's much more of a sophisticated strategy around a brand life cycle and where brands are and how they're being monetized. And there's generally a sense that the brand should always exist in market in some way, shape, or form. I mean, and a great example of this is like Blackthorn from Blizzard, right? Like, no, nobody really cares. But should you have an expression? Is there probably some licensor willing to pay for it? And should you have an expression of it somewhere, if only to keep your trademarks up? Yes, you probably should. And it's weird to me that, there's not more maturity there.
Is that in some way a reflection of the business model of games versus the business model of other media? Because in games, it's almost a zero-sum game, right? Like the money you're making is tied very much to engagement with the model, the way these guys work with microtransactions. So if you put out Heroes of the Storm and then you also put out, Warcraft, if you're the same player, like the player can't play the same, both games. So, you almost don't want to have too many irons in the fire because you want to keep players in your one game rather than like move them around.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I just think it's an issue of, look, ultimately all of these things need to look like the Disney brand blueprint. And the Disney brand blueprint is really, really hard to execute. And most companies are stuck executing just one part of it, which is their core operating, procedures. To me, there's ways to skin the cat and to do it cleverly. Like you could have cheap mobile executions. The remaster is the most obvious. You should just be on a perennial remaster 5-year bump for all of your legacy IP, right? And you can do new content features. You could do, there's a way to structure it.
Game Pass. I think these subscriptions, you're seeing that a lot more now.
Yep. Yeah, there's ways to do it. I just think fundamentally it's a case of, and you sort of said this too, like if you look at what makes a publisher money, it's 90% one thing. And they do everything else to try to find the one thing that makes money. And then once they have that one game that makes money, their entire business becomes leeching off of that game until it wanes into late life cycle and they have to have another one queued up. And I think that leads to a mentality which is not, this is a resource that can be monetized. This doesn't fit our core operating blueprint, so we set it aside, right? It just can't have management time. It can't have management attention, right? And that will change over time, but it's going to take a long time. And candidly, it's not a huge optimization to make on the business. I'd solve in-game advertising in World of Warcraft before I solved, Blackthorn going to a third-party indie developer for a remaster.
Yeah. And look, to be fair, and we talked about this a lot on the podcast, but like, things have swung one way in the pendulum where everything is now a live service. Everything wants all of your time. Everything wants to be this microtransaction behemoth that like is the only all-encompassing game you play. And I think Game Pass is doing a good job with this. Like some of the subscriptions, like there is a place for a small budget, not indie develop, but like small budget, 20-hour RPG. Like there is a place for that.
Yeah, so 100%.
The pendulum will swing.
Yeah,
guys. That kind of wraps up this live stream. We've been here an hour.
It's awesome.
Unless anyone has any other questions, anyone watching still has any other questions, I will say in the meantime, we'd love to get feedback on this first live stream. So if you were in here, let us know. Was it good? Was it not good? What would you change? What would you add? Like, we really would love feedback from the community, and hopefully implement it for the next live stream. The plan right now is to do this every week after we tape our podcast. So every Wednesday night, essentially, or Wednesday evening. And, would love that feedback so we can improve over time. Jeff, thank you for being the first guest on our live stream, which is cool. There's some fame in that, hopefully, when this thing is huge. And I mean, maybe we should finish with this. Might be Cam. All I ask is William finishes the stream with some Heroes of the Storm gameplay. Might be Cam. I will say, William has asked me about 10 million times to play. So
guys, please,
it's really my fault.
One of the big things I've really wondered about is, should Paul and I stream ourselves playing some games? And I'm not saying we're going to be game streamers and be like, oh, this is so fun, oh, drive the car fast, but like talk about a game and the business of the game while playing the game, right? Like, play WoW, but talk about how its systems are driving player retention curves, right? Play Call of Duty Warzone, but talk about how it's driving us to microtransactions and how it's trying to feed us into the core franchise with loadout drops tied to Black Ops 4 or 3 or whatever it is. I can't remember. Like I think that is an interesting thing I want to do more of. But tell us about it. Hit us up, Twitter at Biz Esports. And with that, I am off to ride away on my mount at plus 60% move speed.
No, make sure. Don't forget to plug your book, for God's sake.
Oh, yeah, my book. I forgot about it. Guys, the real one's hardcover. This is just the print copy. It looks, this is the galley. Go buy it. Seriously, guys, the book is really good. The only book I've ever read that's better than this book is the book Paul and I write next together, because believe it or not, books take so long to write. Paul and I didn't really know each other when this was coming into being. But honestly, guys, like, if you're here, you must be a pretty hardcore fan. I really do think this is the best thing that this crystallizes my view on the space. So please, and pre-orders make a huge difference. Please give it a shot. If you pre-ordered once, do it again. No shame in hitting that buy it now button
Just
twice.
buy one book. They don't need to buy 2 books. Let them buy one.
Don't
And be
sound
happy
desperate,
with it.
man.
No, I'm all about double monetization. It's about getting incremental purchases per user.
No, I will say the plan also is to start putting all the podcasts up on YouTube, as well as wherever you get your podcast. But we're definitely going to put the live stream VODs up on YouTube. So check them out there. Follow us on YouTube, on Twitter, everywhere else. And thank you guys. We will see you next week.
Let's do it.
Thank you, guys.